One of Tarkin's very beliefs was the fact that fear alone would help someone rule the galaxy and keep the people in check. While this is true to some extent, he forgot what happens when people live in fear for too long. They rebel and fight back. Leading the galaxy through fear literally created rebel cells who constantly fought back against the Empire from the time of the Clone Wars to the Age of the Rebellion, and Tarkin only ever tightened his grip on systems and people who dared to oppose the Empire's will. Tarkin was in charge of some of the cruelest operations in the Empire's history, and all it did was manage to drive the rebels in the area to band together and fight back. While this aligned with Palpatine's beliefs fairly well, Tarkin's practice of what he preached seemed to be even more relentless when it came to military strategies, as he was seen destroying villages and families just to draw out rebel cells on indigenous planets. His reliance on fear and technology to win wars was one of his greatest mistakes, as he forgot the humanity and heart of a populace and how strong it can be. He ignored the very premise of a rebellion and how one is started, and only focused on strength through brute force and numbers. This hubris also led him to take credit for Project Stardust, even though this was always the brainchild of director Krennic and his team of scientists. While this led to great praise coming his way for creating a destructive force that hadn't been seen in the galaxy before, it also led to him taking the blame for its downfall and failure. Not that it really mattered in the end, since he died on the Death Star though. The Kaminoan clone facility at Tipoca City was a phenomenal asset to the Empire, which could have been used to create troopers for many years to come. But Tarkin didn't believe that the clones were trustworthy after seeing how efficiently they carried out Order 66. He was impressed with Clone Force 99, but after testing their loyalty, he ended up driving them to the Rebel Alliance and solidified his view on the clones, which he felt were barely different from the droids. As an answer to this, he decided to have his second-in-command destroy Tipoca City, and all of the cloning gear and scientific research was lost with it, which could have proven to be extremely valuable to Palpatine's future efforts. Whether or not he believed clones were important or not, everything that was already established in Tipoca City could have been repurposed in a way that benefited the Empire's efforts in the scientific division. While he was successful in destroying the facility and everything in it, he failed to eliminate Clone Force 99, which was one of his main targets, and they became a valuable asset to the Rebel Alliance and their mission to protect Omega from the Imperial Science Division. This show of force also proved early on in the Empire's rule that they were willing to destroy entire populations, and showed just how brutal they planned to be in their rule. When facing an already unstable government on Mon Cala, Tarkin didn't help the situation by taking a very manageable uprising and using to his advantage. But instead, he thought this would be a great time to have a show of force through fear, and turned Mon Cala into a martyr world instead of a peaceful one like it used to be. The Empire arrested the leader of the planet, King Lichar, and installed their own puppet leader to try and quietly turn the planet into a system for the Empire. But a rebellion turned against the government and fought back. On top of that, instead of backing the Mon Calamari citizens in their struggle, he focused on backing the Quarren instead, which drove a larger divide between the Empire and the indigenous population. Mon Cala could have been very instrumental in the Empire's war efforts, as it had very handy shipbuilding facilities, great routes and naval logistics, and engineers who would later become key to building rebel flagships. But Tarkin, once again, felt like he could use fear to turn the people back into the Empire's arms. Instead, his show of force through mass executions and misuse of clones to crush insurgencies drove the surviving citizens of Mon Cala into the rebels' arms. Tarkin hoped that fear would isolate Mon Cala from other surrounding systems and prevent others from interfering in their affairs, but his cruelty actually drew the attention of off-worlders and created outrage with other neutral systems in the sector. When Tarkin found out that there had been a leak in the plans for the Death Star, he sent the man that he just stole credit from, director Orson Krennic, to deal with the issue instead of working with the man to contain the issue. Tarkin made it very clear that he had no problem using his own men to further his own ambitions in the ranks of the Empire, and he made a very powerful enemy in Krennic who could have been an invaluable ally. Instead of working together to prepare Scarif for a rebel attack, Tarkin showed up late with the Death Star to try and silence Krennic and his own people, along with the rebels, instead of taking a more strategic look. With the rebels already stealing the plans and sending them off-world, Tarkin had no real purpose in destroying Scarif or the Imperial facility, which held countless secret archives that the Empire could have used in the years to come. But in a show of hubris, he took out Krennic, the facility with the archives, and countless Imperial lives. This was meant to silence Krennic and the rebels, but all it did was destroy Imperial information that was only known to be housed in the archives on Scarif and show that he held no disregard for the lives of his own Imperial officers and soldiers. Prior to this show of force, the might of the Death Star was only witnessed by K2SO, Jyn Erso, Cassian Andor, Bodhi, Baze, and Chirrut, technically. But with the destruction of the facility on Scarif, he gave the whole of the Rebel Alliance a sneak peek at the destructive power of the Death Star, which was only considered to be a strong rumor with no eyewitnesses aside from the Rogue One squad. The element of surprise that made the Death Star such a dangerous concept up until this point was gone, and now the entire Rebel Alliance was on the same page when it came to what they needed to do to band together to destroy it. One of Tarkin's most recognizable actions is the destruction of Alderaan as a show of force to Princess Leia and the rest of the rebellion, but this was actually one of his greatest career mistakes. While Tarkin did this to show the ultimate destructive power of the fully functional battle station that was the Death Star, it ended up backfiring in the worst way possible. Alderaan was a pacifist planet with no military presence, and acted as a target with no military advantage. Even in modern times, this is considered a war crime. But this ended up being the moment that drew neutral systems to sympathize with the rebellion against the Empire. With the Senate dissolving, this led to the ultimate rise in power of Palpatine, but it left districts to be governed by their individual governors and their methods of terrorizing their constituents. While Palpatine had claimed that the dissolution of the Senate was only temporary until the Rebel Alliance was crushed, this ended up sweeping away every last trace of the Republic, which didn't return while Palpatine was still alive. Tarkin's pride played a huge part in why he wanted to have a strong show of force, but the fact that he picked one of the most peaceful planets in the galaxy, which had strong ties to powerful people in politics, led to the Empire gaining even more enemies. Continuing in Tarkin's mistakes during the time of the Death Star's construction, he overlooked one big flaw: the fact that the battle station had a vulnerability in the vent. At this point in the Empire, it's common knowledge that Galen Erso was no fan of the Empire, so having him design the galaxy's strongest weapon for the very organization that he opposed was not the greatest plan. During the construction of the Death Star, Tarkin interacted with Director Krennic multiple times over the course of the station's development, and he was well aware of the fact that the plans to the battle station were compromised and eventually stolen on Scarif. So, instead of taking extra precautions and keeping the station in a safe, secret area of the galaxy, Tarkin took the station straight to Yavin 4 to try and wipe out the entirety of the rebellion. After analyzing the plans stolen by the Rogue One squadron on Scarif, the Rebel Alliance found a weakness in a thermal exhaust port, and they mounted an offensive against the Empire. At the same time, General Moradmin Bast notified Tarkin of the potential danger and offered to prepare an evacuation shuttle for him. This leads directly to yet another mistake that Tarkin made during the attack from the rebels. He underestimated them and decided not to evacuate. Tarkin very easily could have evacuated the Death Star to fight another day, and considered his military strategy IQ, this could have easily led the Empire to better days in the coming war with the Rebel Alliance. Tarkin didn't think that the rebels would be much of a threat to the battle station, even with the vulnerability that Galen Erso designed. There were only about 30 ships in total that flew out to attack the Death Star, and in anyone's military-savvy eyes, that's nowhere near enough to bring down a battle station of the Death Star's capacity. Obviously, he was underestimating the resolve of the rebels and the fact that a Force-sensitive Luke Skywalker was among the ranks who were performing the trench run, but that shouldn't have mattered. Why take the chance? Tarkin should have taken a page out of General Grievous's playbook and evacuated the second that there was a possibility of the rebels coming out on top. With his death, Palpatine lost one of his key enforcers, and the Empire lost one of their most prized military minds who could have easily helped them rebuild in the days after the Death Star's destruction. He really felt like one small starship was no match for the greatness and power capabilities of the Death Star, and this hubris ended up being one of his greatest mistakes. Prior to the attack mounted by the rebels from Yavin 4, Tarkin was also warned of the rebellion's chances from one of the Empire's most feared and revered military geniuses, Darth Vader. If Tarkin should have heeded anyone's warnings, it should have been Vader's. While he did eventually come around to the warnings of Obi-Wan Kenobi being on the battle station and tampering with it, he didn't listen to any other warnings about the rebels being a threat. Tarkin knew Vader from the Clone Wars when he was known as Anakin, and the two of them worked closely together after Vader came to join the Empire after the events of Mustafar. Tarkin had witnessed Vader's premonition power firsthand on multiple accounts, but for some reason, he really had an issue with Vader's words of warning at this moment. Vader had a strong connection to the Force, which let him sense the likes of Obi-Wan Kenobi and Luke Skywalker when they were on the battle station and during the trench run attack from Yavin 4. For some reason, Tarkin decided not to trust Vader's intuition and mysticism and relied completely on machines and military power, which ended up leading to his downfall.